Welcome back, everyone, to theCUBE's live coverage here at the New York Stock Exchange. It's theCUBE's East Coast studio. Of course, we got Palo Alto and NYSE connecting technology and Wall Street, bringing all the access. Our access point in New York, we got the Palo Alto area, so we're bringing it all together here. Citi is here with a big event inside the Stock Exchange talking about robotics. The leaders are all here, bringing them into theCUBE. If we can't get them in person, we bring them in remote. We got our next great guest who's going to break down where robotics is heading, but more importantly, the ecosystem around it and kind of what are the core trends and the key drivers in this market. Saman Farid, CEO of Formic. Thanks for joining us remotely from the Bay Area. I just came from there with the Palo Alto studio, so we'll certainly have you down. Thanks for joining us remotely here, New York Stock Exchange.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be here. Awesome to connect robots and always fun to see people interested in them.
Yeah, I love your background. You've been an investor, you're an entrepreneur, you got the company you've been building. You're in the heart of the robotics area, and of course, if you're living under a rock, maybe you don't know this, but Jensen Huang has been on a fire at NVIDIA talking about robots in all his speeches. Really, as a centerpiece, I call it the North Star for him because it's where AI goes on the physical side. You're seeing kind of this intelligent edge emerge with robotics, where all the use cases are manufacturing, warehouses, retail, you name it, where the physical humans are, where there's physical property and goods, and it's just connecting them with the goodness of AI, open source, and everything else. So first thing, let's set the table. What are you working on now? Explain your venture, why you guys exist, what's your vision?
Yeah, thank you so much. I appreciate it. So to your point, the vast majority of GDP is in the physical world, right? We have technology that's impacted our digital lives for the last 30 years, both financially, kind of in terms of data and news consumption and media, right? We've already seen our world change, but the vast majority of GDP has continued to be locked up in these very traditional industries, manufacturing, agriculture, construction, healthcare. And it's not until robots have kind of eyes and ears in the form of AI and arms and legs in the form of robots that we're going to start to see that impact on the wider economy. So we started Formic with that exact idea. We have deployed robots now in more than 100 factories. We've built a series of software tools that make it easy to deploy and easy to manage robots. We've also built a business model. We're the first ones to do what's called kind of fully managed services around automation. So we drop into factories that don't have their own in-house robotics engineers and AI engineers, and we help them solve a bunch of those complex issues, and we just get paid a kind of monthly or hourly rate to solve those labor shortages for these factories. And so we've seen a massive uptick in adoption of robotics as a result of these things that we've done. As you may know, 98% of American manufacturing is small and medium-sized businesses. And more importantly, about 70% of those have never deployed a robot ever in their history. And we're kind of facing on the one side that lack of adoption. On the other hand, greater than ever labor shortages. There's about 1.5 million unfilled manufacturing jobs in America today. As the work around tariffs and reshoring manufacturing continues to happen, we're seeing an increased demand in domestic manufacturing, and that labor shortage is not getting any better. And so the only way that we can, as a country, kind of meet the moment of the day and try to increase the American industrial base is by adopting far more robotics, and that's what we're here to try to do.
I love that mention around the small, medium-sized businesses because what's really great is if you look at the robotics innovation, it used to be for the rich. It's my word. Maybe I'm saying that, but the big companies, big factories, big dollars, big IT, big edge spend. Now you're talking about kind of like bringing it down to access, managed service. This is huge. Can you quantify and scope the opportunity? Because by bringing down and kind of with democratization of supercomputing with the cloud and also on-prem, you got the now hardware to run factories, AI factories, in tandem with physical plants. And they could be small, medium, or distributed, a bunch of semi-large distributed systems or factories or manufacturing. It's not just the big monolithic factory anymore. Can you share your thoughts on that? Am I getting that right? And what's your perspective on that piece?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. I think, we love to see videos of these highly automated factories. General Motors and Ford and Tesla are great examples of factories that have automated over the last 30 years pretty heavily. What people often forget is for every General Motors plant, you have between 2,000 to 4,000 suppliers that make various components, whether it's nuts and bolts or seats or engine assemblies that all get built in these smaller and medium-sized factories, and those components all end up at a General Motors plant and get assembled into a final car that you buy. And so what is often missed is that the vast majority of the supply chain is actually these small, medium-sized businesses. The same thing applies in consumer packaged goods.
Yeah.
Our robots help make food products, dog food and chocolate chip cookies and tortillas. Our robots help make plastic injection molded parts for lawnmowers and golf carts. And for every kind of end product that you buy, there are hundreds, if not thousands, of subcomponents that come together to make up that final product. Historically, a lot of that supply chain has been overseas. Some of it continues to be in the US. And
Yeah.
as we have seen in the last few months, there's this kind of massive incentive to try to bring more of that supply chain back domestically.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up supply chain because one of the things that jumped out at me at NVIDIA's GTC, because they did talk about AI factories, digital twins, all that. We can get into some of that in a minute. But one of the things that jumped out at me was their multi-year roadmap that they put out on the chips. Obviously, they want to keep the ecosystem happy. But we noticed the business model opportunity that seems to be there. And I want to throw this at you to see what you react to on this, because I think we might be seeing the formation of the formula, a template, where you got two-sided marketplace. You got a supply chain on the component side, and then you got the supply chain on the ecosystem side, both instrumented now, right? So whether it's instrumented with tokens on one side and other maybe crypto tokens on the other, there's two tokens maybe on both sides, but you're starting to see the evolution of these two-sided environments where supply chain is an integral part of the input. And that's important, but it's just not only one piece of the puzzle. Is this something that you're seeing in the market, and is this an opportunity for entrepreneurs and for companies to think about innovating around?
Yeah, I think the advent of AI has really changed the landscape of what people need to think about in their supply chain. There are a couple of things to that. One is the types of components that you're going to need in your supply chain look different today than they did in the past. On the one hand, what you used to have to, buy a bunch of kind of industrial scale sensors to do, you can now do with a single camera and AI. What you needed in the past, a lot of custom compute to do, for example, you would have to buy kind of industrial PLCs from Rockwell or Honeywell or Siemens. A lot of those same tasks can now be done in the cloud with a traditional computer with enough redundancy to solve some of those issues. So the kinds of components that are in your supply chain, on the one hand, are going to change. The second thing is at a more macro level, you can also use AI and some of these more modern tools to change the way that you manage your supply chain. That includes both kind of more accurate demand forecasting. It includes more autonomous management of inventory. And hopefully with the adoption of robots at scale, it also allows factories to more dynamically evolve and redeploy their capacity to different kinds of products as they need to. Historical kind of traditional automation was very fixed. When you built an automated line, that line could only make one product all day, every day. And if you're General Motors, that works great. The problem is for most manufacturers, they have to run small batches of production. They have to have a lot more customization. And in order to accomplish that with automation, what's needed is much more flexible and much more intelligent production lines. And so more intelligent robots have a really big part to play in allowing that to happen.
That's a huge point. I want to bring that up, if you don't mind, that versatility factor. Talk about the agility versatility factor, because what's the alternative to not having agility? Resetting the line. Can you scope the costs there and kind of what that would look like vis-a-vis having technology as a tailwind?
Sure. So I would say in a traditional automation world, in order to deploy automation, the typical route is to use heavy kind of system integration services. And system integration services are the avenue by which you kind of built a custom solution for your specific plant. That process of hiring a system integrator generally ends up being between 40 to 60% of your budget gets spent on these custom engineering services, which is really, really massive as a hurdle. What we're seeing is AI and intelligent systems are really reducing the need for that. And then the fully managed services piece that Formic is kind of innovating around is also making it much more accessible to folks, right? So as we standardize these solutions and have them be kind of drop-in ready, we have customers who call us up and say, I have a labor shortage. I need these 5 different tasks in my factory done in an automated way. we can show up within 1 or 2 weeks with a robot that's fully configured to do that task. There are, AI will get us part of the way there. So AI makes the robots smarter and more flexible and more capable to adapt. But there is still a physical constraint where if you're picking up, for example, a bottle of water versus an engine block, you might need a very different kind of robot. You might need a very different kind of gripper. You might need very different types of sensors. And so you need to both resolve the kind of physical differences as well as the algorithmic and computational differences to accomplish that flexibility.
Talk about the company you founded, the use cases you're going after, and what are some of the examples you can share? Because an end-to-end workflow that's lower cost or easy to get into, buy as you go, sounds like cloud to me, feels like you're lowering the bar to get in with robotics. What's the use case? Are robots actually involved? Are you provisioning those robots too? Is it an end-to-end from full end-to-end workflows? Take us through the use case.
Yeah, absolutely. So the typical use case is, we'll get a call from a manufacturing facility that is short-staffed. And just to give you a picture of what their world typically looks like, the typical American factory today has about 30% unfilled headcount and has about 200% per year annual turnover in their headcount, which means for a factory that's 500 people, you would often need to hire 1,000 people a year just to keep that factory in business. And so there's this massive shortage of available labor for these factories. So what happens is they might get a call from some big automotive company or from General Mills or from Procter and Gamble or somebody else that says, hey, I have this new product I would like to make. Can you be my contract manufacturer to make it? And obviously every business owner's dream is to be able to say yes to such a request. The problem becomes that they no longer have the capacity, right? They have kind of maxed out their labor available. Their facility may only be running 8 hours a day or 7 hours a day because of the labor that they have available. But without automation, they're not able to go and grow and meet that demand and win new business. So what they'll do is they'll call us and they'll say, hey, look, I have this problem. Can you help me? And so we generally do a full service automation. What that means is we show up and we do an evaluation of their entire production line. And we tell them, hey, it looks like these 5 things can be automated in your facility. And here's roughly the cost associated with that. We use a bunch of software to automate the decision-making process around what needs to be automated and how to automate it. Once those tasks have been identified and the customer says, thumbs up, please automate those 5 things for me, we do all the work. We show up with a bunch of robots that can do those tasks. We have in our fleet a variety of robots that do a bunch of different kinds of tasks. And sometimes it's on a month-to-month basis. Sometimes they're ready to sign annual or multi-year contracts in order to get lower pricing. But depending on the flexibility that they need, we'll come in and fill some of those tasks for them. We do all the kind of engineering work, installation, and more importantly, all the ongoing service and maintenance of those robots. So most of these small factories, they don't have in-house engineering capabilities to manage and maintain robots, program robots, train the AI to adapt to different kinds of situations that come up, do error handling, and all of the complexity that comes with that.
So you're designing and deploying basically
That's right.
AI factories, AI physical.
That's right. And then what happens as an end result is these factories have some of these positions automated. They're now able to take the same workforce that they had before, and they're able to actually expand the overall production of their factory. So they can increase their throughput by between 50 to 150% with the same base, right? They've already paid for the real estate and the forklifts and the trucks and all of the other machinery on their production lines. Now all of a sudden they're doubled or tripled their top line. And more importantly, doubling their top line means they kind of 8x their bottom line because all the fixed costs are already paid for. So you see this kind of massive increase in the efficiency of these factories.
So Saman, they all got promoted to supervisor?
We do tend to make our champions look good. That's right. I mean, a lot of the team members in the factories actually do end up becoming supervisors of the robots.
Yeah.
That's a very common task, right? Like now they get to watch instead of lifting 60-pound boxes and getting rotator cuff injuries or lower back injuries. Yeah. I had a slip disc not too long ago, and so I know the pain associated with that. And now again the risk of injury goes down significantly. The overall productivity of the plant goes up. We help America build a much stronger industrial base that's more resilient to change. And then, what happens in those factories is they start to win more business. They start to take on some of those orders. Our robots are making all kinds of products, some of which end up in your grocery store, some of which end up in Starbucks, some of which end up in your car, some of which end up in your lawnmower, some of which end up in mining and drilling
Yeah.
equipment or defense equipment. All of these different things are now being made by robots. We've strengthened the American industrial base. We've made these factories more profitable. The workers' lives are better. The way that we see it is in order to really reach this goal of kind of improving the American industrial base, robots seem to be the only answer.
Yeah. I mean, joking aside, the human does actually have a good role to play. Talk about the political climate. You mentioned the American dominance in manufacturing, which is clearly a political tailwind right now. What has that been like for you guys? Has that impacted your business? I mean, all you hear from Washington is, hey, we're going to bring manufacturing jobs back to the U.S. The economy's changed. Certainly the form factor, innovation around robots and IoT has changed with data. I mean, this is like a perfect storm. What's been the reaction to you and your business? What's your vision and what's your perspective? And share your thoughts on this, because I think this is a huge point.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of macro forces that are pushing towards kind of a resurgence in American manufacturing. This actually started even earlier than this administration. I think COVID was a big wake-up call when we suddenly couldn't buy toilet paper. There was this kind of massive awakening that if we don't build the things that we're relying on a daily basis,
Yeah.
we're severely at risk. And I think this administration has done a lot to also try to improve the capabilities for American manufacturing. Of course, I think uncertainty around the tariff environment does make it harder for a lot of
Yeah.
manufacturing businesses to make decisions. But I think the general direction is quite clear, which is we're moving to a world where there's going to be people are going to heavily incentivized to try to produce more domestically. So
Yeah.
we have seen, even from the time that the Canada and Mexico tariffs were threatened, we've already started to see an increase in demand for domestic manufacturing. We have kind of live data from every single one of our robots as to how many hours a day it's been used. And we've seen, February and March, we've seen a 9 to 10% increase per month in utilization.
Yeah.
More importantly, a lot of factories are calling us and saying, hey, look, Caterpillar or General Motors or Procter & Gamble or Nestle are calling me and asking me to make more. They used to produce this product in Canada, or they used to produce this product in Mexico, or they used to source it somewhere else overseas, and they're looking for a domestic alternative. But I can't meet that demand. And
Yeah.
can you help give me some robots so that I can go and win that
Yeah.
business? And so we're starting to see a really massive surge of inbound requests from manufacturers who say, I want to move my factory to the 21st century. Please help.
Yeah.
And that's something we've been really excited to see. To your point, there is a lot of tailwind.
Yeah, for all the Star Wars fans out there, that's the Attack of the Clones. They have that factory of clones being built. In a way, this is robotics wave is coming. Have you seen a geographic impact in terms of? I mean, I can almost imagine if you just take computer science theory, distributing workloads around. Is there a trend towards decentralized manufacturing systems versus the monolithic plant, or is that something that's just fantasy in my mind?
I think you're absolutely right. I think decentralized manufacturing is what resilience comes from. We generally don't end up with one massive factory that makes everything. Every single factory has to specialize, right? Somebody makes nuts and bolts, somebody makes engine blocks, somebody makes snack foods, and somebody makes chocolate chip cookies. All of those factories have a variety of different kinds of equipment, different needs.
Yeah.
And really what's amazing about the American industrial base is many of these businesses are family owned and operated. The typical American factory is 3 generations old. It's been, it was started by, somebody's grandfather's grandfather. And as these businesses have grown throughout the years, they've not only become quite large and quite resilient, they've also become the primary employer in most of the towns that they're in. So if you go to a town in the middle of Indiana or Illinois or Wisconsin or California, it's not uncommon for one factory to employ 30% or 40% of a town. And that's really massive as you think about how these businesses are going to grow. They really are tapped out on available, working age adults who want to come and work in a factory. Many young people have left for the cities or would prefer to take different kinds of jobs in the service industry, or they were educated and they work in other industries. And so if you think about kind of what a factory needs in order to attract a minimum wage labor for their factory is really, really difficult today. And so they're all turning to technology.
Yeah.
There are tools around kind of workforce distribution and management that can make the plant more productive. But without robotics, there's only so far you can go.
It's interesting, you see things that happen like this. Gentrification happens. I remember I was talking to a friend about, these new baseball stadiums that get built and all of a sudden San Francisco's booming, where it was once not booming, Colorado, you name it. You see regions like Amazon Web Services go into regions and that creates a revitalization. There's second order magnitude, there's a system effect when you have manufacturing. Could you share your thoughts on that impact? And does that factor into the valuation? Because if this continues, this new wave of kind of manufacturing, not only do the jobs come back, obviously with robots and humans, but there's a kind of a second order system impact with this. Talk about that if you can.
Yeah, I will address that directly, but maybe just to start, I lived in China for a very long time. And in China, you have these massive hubs. Shenzhen is one example, where there's so many different manufacturing facilities in that one region, and you have enough density in that one region that they all really start to benefit from each other. It's much more efficient if I, as a kind of design engineer, can say, hey, I want to invent this new product. I can just go down the street and find somebody who can make the components, and I can go find somebody else who can make the coding, and I can go find another guy who can weld it all together. The time from kind of inception to a new product is weeks. Versus in the US, we typically see a much longer cycle. You have to kind of put out an RFQ and you wait weeks or months in order to get a response. And then hopefully the price point is something that's acceptable, and you have to go through this long iteration cycle. And so what we're seeing in the US is, as density of manufacturing increases, as each of these individual manufacturers become more capable, the net result is we have an economy that can innovate much faster. As a whole, we can kind of bring new products to market much more quickly. I think you see this in the chip industry as well. You mentioned earlier NVIDIA and TSMC. TSMC tried to build this kind of massive facility in Phoenix, but it took them much longer than the equivalent plant would have taken to build in Taiwan. And they had to actually fly in a lot of the talent that they needed in order to do that. All of the components that they needed to source were all very difficult to find. Now, thankfully, I think that is starting to happen in different ways, and that's training an ecosystem of suppliers that can build all the things and meet all of those needs. We have the same challenge around data center build. We have the same challenge around automotive build. We have the same challenge around aerospace. But the same thing applies in every industry. In consumer packaged goods and food and beverage, we have the exact same challenges. And so we're seeing this kind of knock-on effect where it's a flywheel. As the manufacturing gets better, more products are able to be built. That leads to more demand of this manufacturing base, and subsequently more investment in manufacturing. And the net result of that is we get a better manufacturing base, which kind of continues to improve.
Are you seeing hubs right now forming, or is there a trend that you can share? I mean, any hope? That's a good, by the way, that's the same Silicon Valley formula. Money, talent, ecosystem, service providers are all kind of dense around each other. We've seen that spark of creativity when that happens. You mentioned China example, super valuable. Are there signs of hubs developing with manufacturing, or is it the same base as we're known in the US, or is there emergence of new places with money and talent and all that flow?
There absolutely are. I think it's not quite to the same density and scale as China. We generally in the US have a much more distributed manufacturing base everywhere across the Midwest and the Rust Belt. If you look at in the Northeast, kind of Pennsylvania, New Jersey, there's a lot of manufacturing in California still. In the Northwest, there's a lot of manufacturing. In Texas, there's a lot of manufacturing. So, we do have a pretty large and pretty distributed manufacturing base. I would say for us, where we've seen the fastest uptake of automation has been in, number one, the kind of greater Chicago region. So from our kind of Chicago field service team, we can serve parts of Michigan, Wisconsin, Illinois, of course, parts of Indiana, Minnesota. All in that region, we see a lot of manufacturing. In the Northeast, we see a relatively large hub, and then across Northern and Southern California, there is a lot of manufacturing as well.
Yeah, key spots to have those locations. Final question for you on the capital market side: what's the investor appetite around these new dynamics? Are you seeing any things? Are they warm? Are they hot for this air robotics and AI? What's the view of the investor climate?
Absolutely. I think we're getting calls 3 or 4 times a day from different kinds of investors who seem to have suddenly woken up to the fact that manufacturing is a giant, giant market and historically very underserved. I think that level of investor appetite
Yeah.
was kind of unprecedented a few years ago. There have been a lot of conversations in kind of public forums and private forums. I'm here in the Bay Area, where in Silicon Valley regularly, you go to events and people are talking about how do we reindustrialize. There's actually a conference called Reindustrialize. Formic actually just joined the New American Industrial Alliance, which is a group of technology companies that is working across kind of government and the private sector to help support the resurgence of the American manufacturing base. So I would say this is a very, very big topic in the kind of the investor community. Many, many large funds have set up what they call kind of either American dynamism or global resilience funds, or whatever they call it. They all have different names, but the concept is the same, which is how do we rebuild a kind of strengthened industrial base. This is something that it's a long-term project. It's not going to happen in 1 or 2 years. I often, when the investors ask me about it, I say, look, this is a 30-year endeavor.
Yeah.
If we're going to really rebuild the industrial base, but there are enormous returns to be had, even in the very short term.
Yeah.
And I think that's why investors are very excited.
I mean, it's a long game, classic long game philosophy, multiple stakeholders, ecosystems, hubs. I mean, that's not a short-term deal at all. Certainly. Well, great to have you on. Appreciate it. This is the beginning of more robotics coverage with theCUBE, and thanks for sharing all the awesome commentary. We love this trend. We think that the industrial intelligent edge is beyond IoT in the classic sense of IT. I think what you're doing is awesome, lowering the barriers for competitiveness and also efficiency as these supply chains integrate with the data, with the quality. Again, like you said, time to value. Great to have you on. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. This was a lot of fun.
This is awesome. Thanks so much. All right, we're here in New York City at the NYSE CUBE East location. This is our access point on the East Coast. We've got a subnet developing here. We've been here for 15 years, certainly with the big data move. Of course, we've got Palo Alto connecting tech and Wall Street. I'm John Furrier, host of theCUBE, talking robotics, AI, and the future of American competitiveness and globalization of physical AI. Thanks for watching.